I thought the worst day of my life would be the day my father died. I was wrong. The worst day came after the funeral, when I realized that losing him also meant losing the only place I had ever felt safe. My name is Sarah, and I was 32 when my dad passed away suddenly from a heart attack. It happened so fast that my mind couldn't catch up with my heart. One day he was calling me to remind me to eat properly, and the next day I was standing in a black dress listening to people tell me how strong I was, while I felt completely hollow inside. My dad had raised me mostly on his own after my mom died when I was young. He was my anchor, my quiet supporter, the one person who never made me feel like a burden. He married my stepmom, Linda, when I was 20. At first, I tried to be open. I really did. She was polite, always smiling, always saying the right things in front of my dad. But there was something about her that never felt warm. She didn't yell or insult me outright. It was smaller things. She would rearrange my childhood photos into a box and leave them in the garage. She would call me sensitive whenever I tried to talk about my feelings. My dad brushed it off, saying she just needed time, and I trusted him enough to let it go. After my dad's death, everything blurred together. The funeral was held on a gray morning, the kind where the sky looks heavy, like it's about to collapse. I stood next to Linda, accepting condolences from people I barely knew, while she cried loudly and dramatically. People kept hugging her, telling her how lucky my dad was to have her. I stood there quietly, my hands shaking, feeling invisible in my own grief. When the service ended and everyone slowly drifted away, I thought we would go home together. The house my dad bought when I was 10, the house where every corner held a memory of him. I needed that space. I needed to sit on the couch where we used to watch old movies and feel like he was still somehow there. But instead, Linda turned to me in the parking lot, her face suddenly cold and tight. She didn't look like the grieving widow anymore. She looked like someone who had been waiting for this moment. She told me we needed to talk. I followed her back to the house in silence, my chest aching with every step. When we walked inside, the smell of flowers from the funeral filled the air, mixing with the familiar scent of my dad's coffee. I barely had time to set my bag down before she crossed her arms and told me I couldn't stay there anymore. She said it was time for me to move on, that I was an adult and this was her house now. Her voice was calm, almost bored, like she was asking me to return a borrowed item. I thought I had misunderstood. I asked what she meant, my voice barely working. She repeated herself, slower this time, and added that she needed space to grieve and didn't want to deal with reminders. I realized then that I was the reminder. Not my dad's clothes, not his photos, but me. I felt something inside me crack, but I didn't argue. I was too tired, too broken. I packed a bag that night, my hands moving on autopilot, and left the house I had grown up in without saying goodbye. I stayed with a friend for a few days, barely sleeping. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my dad's face, and every time I opened them, I felt the sharp sting of rejection. I told myself that Linda was just grieving, that maybe she would calm down, that this wasn't really happening. But deep down, I knew better. This wasn't grief, this was something she had planned, and I had no idea just how deep her secrets went. A week after the funeral, the shock started to wear off, and the anger crept in. It wasn't loud at first. It sat quietly in my chest, heavy and warm, growing every time I replayed Linda's words in my head. I began to notice things I had ignored before. The way she had rushed through the funeral arrangements, the way she had insisted on handling all the paperwork alone, the way she avoided eye contact whenever someone mentioned my dad's past. One afternoon, I went back to the house while I knew she would be out. I told myself I just needed a few more things, but really, I needed answers. Walking through those rooms felt surreal, like I was trespassing in my own life. That's when I noticed a folder on the dining table. It wasn't hidden, almost like she didn't expect me to come back. Inside were documents, neatly stacked. Legal papers. My heart started pounding as I flipped through them, my fingers trembling. That's when I saw it. A marriage certificate. Not my dad and Linda's. Her name was there, but next to it was another man's name. The date made my stomach drop. It was from 3 years ago. According to this, Linda had been married to someone else while she was married to my dad. My mind struggled to process it. I checked again, convinced I was mistaken, but the truth didn't change. She had been legally married to another man the entire time. I sat down at the table, my legs weak. Suddenly, everything made sense. Her need for control, her coldness toward me, her rush to push me out. If this came out, it would destroy the image she had built. It would raise questions about my dad's will, about their marriage, about everything she thought she owned now. And she knew it. For a moment, I just cried. Not loud, dramatic sobs. Quiet tears that soaked into my sleeves as I thought about my dad. How he had trusted her. How he had no idea. The betrayal wasn't just mine, it was his too. And that hurt more than anything she had done to me. That night, I didn't sleep. I kept replaying every interaction, every smile she had given him, wondering how someone could live such a lie. By morning, my sadness had shifted into something steadier, clearer. I wasn't thinking about revenge in a dramatic way. I wasn't planning to scream or expose her out of anger. I just knew one thing. I couldn't let her erase my dad's truth or push me out like I meant nothing. I started making calls, quiet ones. I spoke to a lawyer, carefully, just asking questions. I spoke to an old family friend who knew my dad before Linda, and I asked if he remembered anything strange about her. Bit by bit, the picture became clearer. This wasn't a small mistake. This was a double life. And the more I learned, the more I realized that Linda's power depended entirely on silence. By the end of that week, I had everything I needed. Copies of documents, dates, names, proof that couldn't be brushed away or explained. I didn't feel excited or proud. I felt calm. For the first time since my dad died, I felt like I was standing on solid ground again. Linda thought she had won by kicking me out. She had no idea that by doing that, she had given me the space to see the truth clearly. I didn't confront Linda right away. I waited. I let her get comfortable. I let her believe that I had disappeared, that I was just another problem she had successfully pushed aside. A month later, she organized a small family gathering at the house. Nothing big, just close relatives and a few friends. She wanted to present herself as the grieving widow who was bravely moving forward. I knew that because she sent me a message, short and polite, inviting me as if nothing had happened. When I walked into the house that evening, my heart raced, but my face stayed calm. The rooms looked different, sterile, like my dad had never really lived there. Linda greeted me with a tight smile, her eyes flicking over me like she was checking for cracks. We exchanged small talk, and for a moment, it almost felt normal. Almost. After dinner, when everyone was sitting in the living room, Linda stood up to say a few words about my dad. She talked about love, honesty, and how important truth was in a family. I watched her closely as she spoke, and I realized she truly believed she was untouchable. When she finished, there was a quiet moment. That's when I stood up. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse her in anger. I simply said there was something I needed to share, something my dad would have wanted the family to know. I saw the color drain from her face before I even said it. I explained, calmly, that while sorting through paperwork, I had discovered that Linda had been legally married to another man during her marriage to my dad. I placed copies of the documents on the table, one by one, letting the room absorb the truth. The silence was heavy. Someone asked Linda if it was true. She tried to laugh it off, then tried to explain, then finally broke down, her carefully built image collapsing in real time. I felt no joy watching it happen. Just a quiet sense of closure. The truth was out. My dad's story was no longer being rewritten. In the weeks that followed, everything changed. Legal questions were raised. Family members who had once avoided me now called to apologize. The house was no longer just hers. More importantly, I stopped feeling like a guest in my own life. Losing my dad will always be the deepest pain I carry. But what this experience taught me is that silence can be more damaging than truth. Being kicked out felt like the end of everything. In reality, it was the beginning of me standing up for myself and for the man who raised me. Sometimes the people who try to erase you are the ones who unknowingly give you the strength to be heard.